it is an absolute joy to welcome Karen Hachhauser, Sharon Richter, Rabbi Rothwax, and Rabbi Benovitz to this conversation together, sponsored by NCSY and Camp Morashah, about bringing Seder to life, a topic that, frankly, this year, more than any other year, has been a challenge. And I want to begin by talking about that challenge. I am suspicious, and I have a theory, that given the stress and difficulty surrounding the Seder this year, we're almost placing too much pressure on the Seder itself. And before we talk about the details of this question, I wanted everybody to maybe share briefly, what is a Seder experience in your past? Not a class that you've listened to, not an idea that you've heard, but an actual Seder that you have experienced, that you look back at most fondly. Because I think to begin the conversation, we have to put in perspective and confront in a sensitive, but also a pragmatic way, what role does this night play in our continuing lives? And it's obviously an important role. I was wondering if you could highlight one Seder experience that you look at most fondly, and perhaps we can begin with Karen.
Okay, I think that's a really interesting question to ask, like you said, especially now. I'd say for me, I think the most fond Seder experiences I have, certainly as a mother, are all found in the little things. I think in Israel, we get, you get a different experience because you only have one Seder. So it's like, you got to make it count. There's no such thing as a warm-up Seder anymore. So everyone's all in on Seder night, no matter how tired you are, no matter what's going on, no matter if this kid is sick or these kids are fighting. And to me, I'd say the most joyous memories really come from that, where the feeling of everyone sitting around the table saying, we've prepared for this, we've worked, and now we're really sitting back as B'nai Chorin and just taking in the Torah and the messages and the ideas, even in the small things.
Beautiful. It's funny, for me, the Seder I look at most fondly is I spent most of my early Sedarim falling asleep during Shulchan Aruch. That was my custom up until probably even an early teenager, if I'm perfectly honest with myself. And I don't think I heard Haggadah until I was in high school, like actually sung at the Seder. And the Seder that I look at most fondly is one where after Shulchan Aruch I snuck off into the living room, for a quick nap. And usually I would wake up the next morning. And one year I woke up as they were beginning Haggadah, and it was like this miraculous experience, like, oh, they actually sing this song. Like, I had never heard it sung at a Seder until I was fairly old, because I'd always pass out and fall asleep. So if we could go to the next panelist to get a quick answers over here. Rabbi Benovitz, do you have a particular Seder experience that you look at most fondly?
I don't, and I don't mean that as a cop-out, and I think it's actually particularly relevant to this year's experience, because for so many of us, probably for almost all of us, this year is going to stand apart from all years before it. It will be a Seder like no other in so many different ways. And many of my memories, many of my experiences, which have spanned, as was just mentioned, have spanned continents, have spanned generations, have been in different homes, but they've all had a tremendous amount in common. And I can identify the parts of those Sedarim that have been so meaningful. When the Seder is a culmination, as was so beautifully said a moment ago, when you can have that sense of working towards something and have it not be anticlimactic, and have it be something which is really the release that we so desperately need. And when you can draw from, obviously, family, our tradition, our Masorah, and you can draw from that and bring it to bear on our modern experiences and to bring it bear on our Seder, you have something that is truly magical. And it is my hope and prayer that we'll be able to do that this year, even under the circumstances that we are under, because I think we need it more than ever.
Amen. Sharon, can you share with us a Pesach experience that you remember most fondly?
Sure. I would say that, again, it's not one in particular, but it's those years when the Seder is over and you say, we did it. Like that balance was right. The older people at the table and the younger people and the guests and the grandparents, everybody had an address. Somehow we were able to meet everybody's needs that were sitting around, each person that was sitting around the table. It worked. And those are the Sedarim that I remember most fondly.
Thank you so much. Rabbi Rothwax, do you have a recollection, a memory to share?
So the truth of the matter is I just changed my answer listening to the other ones because I had thought beforehand that I was going to refer to a Seder over 20 years ago. But the truth of the matter is Karen reminded me that, in Israel, they don't have a warm-up Seder. Well, actually, I did have a warm-up Seder in Israel 2 years ago, the first and only time I was able to celebrate Pesach in Eretz Yisrael. My daughter had a baby Erev Pesach, and my family and I were able to spend that Yom Tov in Eretz Yisrael, which was very special. Needless to say, that the first Seder, which we actually had at the Benefices, was memorable, but the second night, in some ways, was more memorable because it was, in some ways, everything a Seder is not supposed to be. Everyone who went around us was basically going about their business as usual. The buses were running, and we were almost made to feel bad. We weren't the only ones, but what we were doing was so strange. Here we were observing Yom Tov Sheni in Eretz Yisrael. And we made it work. It was obviously awkward. We had members of the extended family who live in Eretz Yisrael coming in and out, with their musical instruments at certain points and maybe even, sneaking a look at their phone. But I think the reason that's so memorable, and just reflecting back on what's been said already, you can make the best of any situation. In many ways, given the context, that was not ideal, but we made it work. We made it work in a way that worked for us at that particular time. And I think if we can go into this year with a similar attitude, and not allow ourselves to just pull down and saying to ourselves, it's not supposed to be this way, and this is not the way, this is not what we had planned for, but to recognize that in all situations, regardless of what's going on in and around our homes, we can make the best of it. It could be a truly memorable experience.
It's an excellent segue to our next question that's probably more timely and relevant given the Pesach that we are all staring at next week. I remember I spent the Seder once at my sister's house, and they had prepared a great deal. They had a young daughter. Now she's a teenager. At the time, she was around 3 years old, and they planned all sorts of games and ways of involving her. And she had a doll at the time named Woo-Woo, who was this toy pink doll. And in their excitement about teaching her the Mitzrayim story and Yetzias Mitzrayim, she insisted that Woo-Woo is the one who took Klal Yisrael out of Mitzrayim. And it really sucked the air. I remember watching my brother-in-law kind of frustrated that my niece was not getting the majesty of the moment that he had prepared all this, put all this effort in for. And this 3-4-year-old child kind of took it in a different direction. More personally, and I just shared this, I hope it's appropriate to plug something that I just published. When I was in my 20s, I had 1 year that I spent a Seder alone by myself. And I just wrote about that. I'm happy to share the link. And I think that going into this year, and as kind of to piggyback on what you just mentioned, Rabbi Rothwax, could everyone share a recollection of a Pesach Seder that did not go as planned, and how did you react? I mean, we have this mythical memory about what the Pesach Seder is, and sometimes when you think back, nearly all of our Sedarim, the beauty of it, the memories of it emerge from the fact that it didn't go as planned, not because it went as planned. So maybe we could start with Sharon.
Sure. So I'm going to piggyback on the last answer that I spoke about. that our best sedarim are the ones when we feel like we've really met everybody's needs at the table. And I recall a Seder about 4 years ago when that didn't happen. And here, my husband and I had just given this big Pesach Sparks presentation and gave lots of ideas for lots of families of how to make it work. And we were all pumped and planned for exactly what we were going to do for each Seder. But because we had a divide in terms of ages at our table within our own kids, it was our first year of trying to meld new ages that we hadn't melded before. And after the Seder, we were like, that was okay, but okay is not really good enough. And then we kind of regrouped together, the two of us, and spoke before the second Seder. That was an advantage of being in Chutz La'aretz, of having a second chance, and of trying to more carefully hone into all of the different needs and ages at the table. And what I found interesting is that I presented a workshop last night for parents in the SIR community. And when I lamented and tried to address the fact that it is going to be harder this year because we don't have our regular participants, a parent actually sent me an email afterwards that said that there's an aspect about that she's really looking forward to this year, because she's going to be able to focus solely on her children and exactly where each of them is at, and not need to worry as much about all the different needs of a distant relative that's hungry, or another one that wants the conversation to be more sophisticated or less sophisticated. And I thought that was an interesting perspective on what this year could offer if we are looking for the rosebud and not the thorn.
Very helpful. Rabbi Benovitz, are you comfortable sharing a Seder that went awry?
Sure. I think it happens very often. We're climbing up quite a steep ladder, and we're on a diving board, with a lot that can go wrong. There's no table that looks more beautiful, no tablecloth that's more white, and no more time where you have a greater propensity for stains. That grape juice is waiting to spill all over the beautiful table and to ruin all of the great plans. And I think we all have Sedarim where the kids may not be behaving the way that we would expect them or want them to, in our own kind of naivety and unrealistic expectations for the way that they're going to respond. We all have the Sedarim where things don't, we have a vision of what we want to say and how we want it to be. And I can remember many Sedarim where that's not exactly the case. But I also remember being able to make something beautiful out of that, and being able to experience some of the beauty of when things go wrong and overcoming certain challenges that are there, and embracing kind of the chaos of life that's there. Now, that's obviously a loaded concept in the heavy things that we're dealing with right now. I don't think this is something that any of us should be embracing or that we want to embrace. So I certainly wouldn't want to be misunderstood in that context. But there's a way to look at that table before the Seder starts and to see the way that everything is set up perfectly, and to really take great delight in that. And then to look a couple hours later at all the things that have gone wrong and be able to take a certain amount of comfort in that we're able to sit around that table with its stains and with its, kind of bickering that goes back and forth, and to make something really, really beautiful from that as well.
I don't want to call out specific family members, but I think everybody's had guilty of a Seder meltdown. I think starting with the generation above me, my generation, the generation below me, I almost demarcate the different years of the Sedarim. It's like, which child stormed out? Like, which dad, checked out of the Seder in the middle? Every year somebody gets triggered, and the expectation sometimes can pressurize and create memories themselves as well. Let's turn over to Rabbi Rothwachs. I know you had shared something along the lines of this question of a Seder going awry as your fondest memory. Do you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Picking up where you just left off, I think that, people very often are triggered at the Seder, and sometimes that's inevitable. But probably, if we would sort of just come to terms with the fact that the Seder, I mean, there's sort of a paradox when you think about it. We call it a Seder, which means that it is by definition supposed to be regimented, and it follows a very specific order. You can't start with Orchatz, and it would be awkward if you did Challah before Magid, and I'm not suggesting you do. But at the same time, you see even from Chazal that there is supposed to be something which is genuinely spontaneous about the entire Seder experience. The fact that, you know, it's Kedei Sheyishtalu, we do things in order to prompt a spontaneous, genuine, you know, sense of wonder, what's going on over here. The fact that it's, you know, Kan HaBen Shoel, I don't think is merely, you know, a point in which every child is supposed to look in their and say, oh, now it's time for me to ask a question. But Chazal was sort of setting the stage and hoping that we would come to the table, literally and figuratively, and be able to participate in a way that is genuine. I suppose, and you know, without reflecting, you know, with too much detail on a Seder that had gone awry, that if we could all take a deep breath and tell ourselves as follows: as long as people are participating in a way that is genuine, in which they are engaged in a meaningful way, and I don't want to take too much of the time at the moment to define what that means, but I mean it, you know, in its most simplest, you know, of terms. Just to be there, to be present, and to be engaged, even as the proverbial Russia and the Inu Yodei Lishol, you know, participate in the Seder, and it's not, you know, we should make note of the fact that Chazal speak about a Seder that includes many people and situations which are imperfect, you know, then that is a great Seder. And if we can accept that going in and sort of psych ourselves, so then, you know, we'll be less triggered. And looking back, I mean, thankfully, the fondest memories I have is when it went well, along the lines of what Sharon mentioned. But I'm sure, certainly in my early years as a parent, you know, there's just so much that sort of needs to happen within a prescribed period of time. And that's when the tension starts to mount. And if we could only say, listen, we're all here, and let's just engage and connect in the most meaningful, genuine way, you know, you're going to set yourselves up for success.
Beautiful. Karen, do you have something you want to add? A Seder memory that did not go as planned. Just remember to take yourself off mute.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, just on top of all the beautiful things that were just said, I'll just say a specific story. Because we have a big age range in our kids, and so that often ends up, I remember one Seder in particular that it was like a battle of the egos. It's very interactive, prizes, costumes, lots of things going on, but it ended up with many, many people of all ages really just upset. It ends up with me sitting on the floor, totally away from the Seder with some kids, you know, I don't know, blocks and playing on the floor, very disconnected to the Seder. And as I think we've heard echoed already, there was something about it that was certainly unpleasant because it wasn't what we planned per se, but there was also a real moment of growth and learning, I think, for us as parents, and I think for our kids to see how we handled a situation when it wasn't going well, and to tie that into what's going today. I think that that's what all of us are right now experiencing in our homes. For all the amazing work that's being done, resources that are out there, school and home and different activities and arts and crafts, you know, when the kids are fighting or when things don't go according to schedule, it can be challenging, but you take a deep breath. And I think like everyone has just said, to sort of look into it and try to find the beauty or at least the serenity within that moment of chaos can actually be quite meaningful.
So let's do a quick question now. I'm going to go around. If everyone could just answer quickly. I'll start with Rabbi Rothwachs. I'm just going clockwise on the screen that I see. Rabbi Rothwachs, Rabbi Benovitz, Sharon, and then Karen. Can everybody please tell me what Haggadah are you going to have next to you at your Seder this year? Rabbi Rothwachs.
Typically, I prefer to have a Haggadah with no commentary whatsoever. That is my preferred. I have, I don't know, probably about 30 or 40 Haggadahs on my shelf, which I will use for, thought beforehand and drushos afterwards. But at the Seder itself, that is my go-to Haggadah, and thankfully we have plenty of those to go around. If I'm feeling the need for some stimulation, I will, give me 1 second.
Oh, show and tell.
I will take this. I actually referred to this the other night, the Cat's Haggadah by Rabbi Chait, because it's just got amazing pictures. And honestly, it's great for adults, not only kids. It really just gets the imagination going. It's done obviously with a lot of precision and depth, reflecting ideas from Chazal. But it's just, again, it creates much more of an experiential.
Beautiful. It's a beautiful Haggadah. Yeah. So obviously I have no idea what Haggadah I'm going to have at my Seder. And I hope everybody can find it. I can recommend some places to look. Obviously, ncsy.org/shop has an amazing Haggadah available. And we'll be sending out a lot of resources before the Seder. But whether or not you know or not, I was wondering if we could continue with Rabbi Benovitz. What Haggadah are you going to have by your side at the Seder?
I'm a little disappointed that you didn't have confidence that any of us were going to do that for you.
Oh,
you jumped there a little bit ahead.
Don't take any chances. We live in an uncertain world.
Rothwax kind of spoke for all of us. I was certainly going to say that the just one Haggadah was going to be my go-to, and I was going to do your business for you. But if you already did that, I imagine that most of us will agree. I think there's even something dangerous about spending the Haggadah buried in a book or a commentary, instead of paying attention to the learning that takes place from conversation and interaction with people. It's obviously critical that we spend our time before the Seder preparing, and there are a number of Haggadahs that I'm very fond of certainly Rav Nevensal's work on the Moadim, which has on it a commentary for the Haggadah. I'm enjoying immensely, as I have over the past few years. Rabbi Rivlin from Keren Biavna just came out with the latest in his series on Yomim Tovim, and it's on Pesach, the new volume appropriate for now. I haven't even opened it yet. I just received it as a gift from my son today. Very excited about that. And if Rabbi Rothwax is already mentioning things that get things going, we have an Eliyahu Hanavi version of the Haggadah that kind of sits at the middle of the table, and when people need a little bit of distraction, they do it. Another gift that we received a number of years ago from my brother-in-law and sister-in-law in Bergenfield, which is an amazing 3D Haggadah with the glasses and all. That is really remarkable, and never, when you need a little bit of a jolt of excitement in the middle of the Seder and get everybody going, you can pass that there's nothing like the red and blue glasses at the middle of the Seder table to get people really fighting over the glasses. That's usually what ends up happening, and that's when it ends.
Sharon.
To dovetail on what the others said, I go for simplicity, but I also go for history and memory. So I have my trusted Rav Kitzhov Haggadah that I've been using for over 30 years with all my wine stains and all my matzah crumbs. And that's the one that I'm going to be using. Beautiful.
Karen? Oh, mute. Sorry, Karen, we can't hear you. Oh, there you go.
Is that better? Okay. I usually end up with whichever Haggadah no one else is using, because it's the same thing. It's more about what's going on around the table. That's not the time that I'm learning. And certainly before the Seder, that's the time to sit down and, hit the books like everyone else has said.
So we spent a lot of time talking about your Seder experiences. This year, sadly, for many people, and nearly for all of us, we're not going to be with the people who we love most at our Sedarim, whether it's parents, siblings, grandparents. And a lot of people have suggested that our Seder not begin on the night of Pesach, but have a pre-Seder Zoom, FaceTime conversation to bring some of the Pesach experience to the people who couldn't be present that night. Leaving aside, obviously, halachic questions about connecting to people on Pesach itself. That's not going to be the topic of this. But for those who are not going to be, you're not going to be able to connect with on Pesach, and you want to connect with them before Pesach, how will you be connecting to them before Pesach begins, Let's begin with Rabbi Rothwax.
Well, again, the platform is there. We're using it right now, and we're all experts in how to use the technology at the moment. So that part is easy. I do think it is beneficial to allow, not only on Erev Pesach, but however often seems to work for those families, for people to come together and interact. Something that I'm finding, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, is in my interactions with other individuals, either in virtual classrooms or in meetings. And even, I have to acknowledge the virtual Mincha Maariv that I've been doing nightly for the members of my shul, while it certainly does not qualify, nor is it a substitute for an actual minyan, in some ways it is a lot more meaningful. There's something really profound about the sort of connection that we're able to achieve in this sort of forum. If and when families do come together, particularly on Erev Pesach, as you pointed out, there are many aspects of the Seder that can be enjoyed and celebrated and experienced, even without getting caught up in the sort of halachic obstacles along the way. I would think, and again, maybe this is just personal, what we love doing at our Seder, and we do quite a lot, is sing, particularly Hallel at our Seder. Can easily take an hour, if not more. I don't know that we will necessarily be able to generate that experience in our Pesach, but I do hope that we will sing. And I would also recommend that people talk about what's right, what we have to be thankful for. I mean, I know it sounds like, very cliche-ish, but at the moment, honestly, we all know what we don't have. We all know what we're missing. We all know what we're mourning. Let's put it this way. If you're connecting with somebody else on Erev Pesach, you already have something to be thankful for, and build from there, and just appreciate, and hopefully that'll be helpful as an infusion of chizuk going into either 1 day or 3 days, depending on where you are.
Beautiful. Sharon, just remember to go off of mute. What are you planning in your family before the Seder?
So my mom will be alone in Israel, and we set up a Google spreadsheet with different categories from the Haggadah, songs, skits, brachot, and we're going to have all the different family members, all the different cousins put contributions in and to make sure that it'll be by category. And then my son is going to put it all together so that it could be like an iMovie, so that my mother can watch in a sequential way. So that's one thing to give her chizuk before the Seder and to see everybody. And this way, everybody can contribute in a way that's comfortable for them and can shine in a way that works well for them. I was in touch with Rabbi Joel Cohn the other day, and he told me that his family, I love this idea too, are going to be sending in one to the other Divrei Torah ideas, etc., to share at each other's Sedarim, so that at the Seder
Beautiful.
itself, other people's names and ideas from the family can be mentioned.
Absolutely beautiful. Karen, do you have any other additions?
Sure. In addition to what was said, I'll just say a technical difference that we're going to do. We're planning on doing a lot of the above aforementioned things, just not on Erev Pesach. Meaning, I think that for our families, a lot of people find that to be a day that's very, very busy. And even when there's less running around this year, unfortunately, than on a normal year, it's a day that actually includes with it a certain amount of stress. So in order to alleviate some of that stress, to make these type of family meetings either a day or two before, where we share different Torah songs, different ideas, or even throughout Chol Hamoed. This is what we did. We're reenacting to keep that experience of the Seder going for family that we're not able to be with this year.
Beautiful, beautiful. So I was wondering if we could just, Rabbi Benovitz, we skipped you. Nothing personal, of course. Rabbi Ben, do you have anything to add about a pre-Seder Zoom?
I think it's important whenever you try to replicate something to not try to do a kind of worse version of that thing and try to take advantage of what you have in the way that's been described in terms of platforms, and to do the ideal version of whatever it is that you're doing. And that's why I, in our family at least, we're going to be more partial to two things that fit that bill. One is to kind of embrace the Erev Pesach experience, which is as valuable in some ways as the Seder night experience. And instead of trying to recreate a Seder where it doesn't belong, we're going to try to recreate virtually some of the Erev Pesach preparations as a family and together with people that we are usually with, to be able to have like the successful challah bakes that have been going on around the world, to have Seder preparations that are being done together, as opposed to pretending that a Seder is actually taking place at 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock in the afternoon, which is going to leave people feeling kind of excited, but also what they're missing out on, and with that painful realization of what they're missing, which is not as good. And similar to that, when we do get together also closer to the Seder, I think very similar to what a lot of people said, we're not going to try to follow the script of the Seder night as much as we're going to try to extract some of those high pieces of the Seder in a meaningful way. Maybe a little bit of discussion, a lot of singing, hopefully, as was said. You could do it with musical instruments and really try to make that ideal as opposed to being something which is secondary.
It reminds me of a Torah you once said about why I think I'm getting the name, why the Pro Bowl, which is the all-star game in football, is never successful, because as opposed to other all-star games, when you're not really tackling because of the danger of getting hit, so the game is kind of watered down. You're only able to transmit and transfer a game in its full glory and beauty. You have to play with the medium itself. And if you substitute and take out tackling, the game isn't the game. And when you are having a Seder via Zoom, you have to realize what does transfer and what does not. We've been getting a few questions, and maybe we could stop and focus on this for a moment. Let's talk specifically about young children at the Seder, and I was wondering if we could weigh in. I'm going to make two different age categories. Let's talk about teenagers as one age category, and let's talk about elementary school children in another. If you want to preface about toddlers and people who maybe ages of I have a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, but maybe under 5. When do you actually start incorporating children in the Seder experience? And do you have any specific strategies and tips to engage all of the people around the table who are maybe less capable of understanding the nuances and beauty of the amazing ideas that we have in the Haggadahs that may or may not be surrounding us? Let's begin with Sharon.
Okay, so first I would say that in terms of having younger kids around the table, when older kids have lots of divrei Torah that they want to share, I think it's important for the dad and mom to be very attuned to what's going on at the table. And if they feel like they're really losing the younger kids, they might want to, for the next section of the Haggadah, decide to push off some of that conversation to Shulchan Aruch and make sure that the younger kids are engaged. If you do have older kids and younger kids, a younger kid could have a job on Erev Yom Tov to walk around the house and hand everybody a small piece of paper and have everybody write down 2 wonderings that they have about the Seder, and the child can write their wonderings too. And by folding them up and making that part of the conversation at the Seder, it's a way to connect a younger child, even if the conversation might be above their head. But if you have older and younger kids, considering having them prepare a skit together that they would put on at the Seder, and the older sibling or the parent can help them together or guide the older sibling to help the younger sibling, depending on everybody's level of sense of humor, personality, etc. Whether it's they go learn a midrash together and there's an interview with Terach about how it was when Abraham, behaved in the way he did in the idol shop, or if you have, little girls at your house and you want to make one of them shifra and one pua and have an older sibling act as paro and even provide some costumes, that could be a way to take the older and younger kids and mix them together.
Yeah. And a pro tip, if your young child wants to incorporate their young pink dog named Woo into their skits, buyer beware, because they may be playing the role of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So just make sure you know what you're signing up for. Karen, do you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Yes, I think that as much as can be visual and experiential, I think that that does wonders, certainly for the younger kids. Even how you give a personal idea. In our house, we divide our space into two. One side is Avdut, one side is Chayrut. The Avdut side gets covered with bricks. We have a pyramid that people sit in. The dining room table becomes the Chayrut side. So there's a lot, even for a 2-year-old, to look at, to ask questions about. And then the older kids get to play the role of teachers. And so that really draws them into the experience. And I think honestly, often older kids like an excuse. I mean, it depends how old they are, obviously, but certainly that upper middle school, they're still looking for an excuse to sometimes be young kids. And so the ability to have that, again, like a built-in excuse to sort of play and get back into that role, really brings a lot of joy to them. And I certainly agree with what we tell our older kids. Divrei Torah, real like Divrei Torah, that happens during Shulchan Orech, or it happens at lunch the next day. And we prepare them that the Seder is a family experience, not a shir. And therefore, all the ages, we want to have as much cooperation and collaboration of all the ages as possible.
Rabbi Benovitz.
I think it's such an important question, and obviously so much of the Seder experience is built around making sure that we involve all of the different ages as much as possible. And as a result, I think there are kind of two extremes that we have to consider strongly and make sure that we don't fall into the danger spot in the middle. On the one hand, we want to gear our activities as much as possible. We want to gear those activities towards the children and in the state that they are in. Children like to have fun. Children like to be excited. They like to be engaged. So to have a very upbeat type of Seder, a very interactive type of Seder, where you don't want to be in the middle in that, of course, is to project our own needs and our own vision of what a meaningful Seder looks like onto people who are not age appropriate for that experience. And I think that's a trap we often do fall into, in projecting our own needs and what would excite us onto people who are less age appropriate for that. And therefore it's critical to remember what that means. But I do think that all the way on the other extreme, there actually is something valuable that we can do. If a person were to make their entire Seder to be catered to all of the different ages, or to try to make it catered to kind of bring up the youngest ages, we'd probably end up with a Seder that we're not necessarily as proud of as we would be otherwise. I remember, as one of my most meaningful and actually comforting childhood memories, I remember many a Friday night falling asleep on the couch, which was in a different room than our dining room where we had our Shabbos meals, and listening to conversations that I did not understand and would never be able at that age to take part in, and hearing Zmiros that I did not know the words to or care to sing, and feeling kind of embraced by the fact that that was going on and that someday I would have a place at that table, and letting kind of the adults do their thing also. And I think, like I said, if we can manage to balance those different elements, we'd have something very, very special. Part of it is, of course, embracing the child where the child is, but also doing what we're doing and telling them that someday they'll get to be part of those conversations also, and that falling asleep to the couch to the sound of a conversation that you don't understand or a song that you don't know the words to can be as nurturing and as developmental for a child as virtually anything else.
Rabbi Rothwachs, you're free to weigh in on this, but I want to pose our final question. Anybody else that has questions should type it in the Q&A. There should be a function that you can send questions. I've been reading all of them. They go to the panelists, but you can send them directly to me or to all of the panelists. You can weigh in on that question, but I wanted you to kick off our final question. I'll give you a little bit more time as we go around. What is your one most favorite Torah that you say over at your Seder? not in a shir, not in Shabbos Haggadah, at your Seder with your children?
I should start with the last question, I'm assuming. First of all, I thank you, David, for leaving me last, the only non-true educator on this panel, to talk about, how to bring many diverse age groups together at the Seder. But I do want to close that question with one final thought, and that is, I really think we have an opportunity this year that we should really take advantage of, and that is to fulfill the mitzvah of Haggadah Levimcha in the way that it was probably supposed to be fulfilled. Some have remarked that over the past probably decades, but it certainly seems over the last number of years, as our schools have become so much more organized and professional, the formal preparation for Pesach is so incredibly advanced that really what's happening very often at the Pesach Seder is the kids are being mekayim, it's not really a mitzvah, the Haggadah Le'avicha, right? That kids are coming home and sort of instructing their parents as to what happened. And sometimes actually that is actually what is happening. That's such a fundamental corruption of what this mitzvah is all about and what it's supposed to be. And so therefore, I would, again, going back to what I said before, I really think that looking for ways to pull people in and just to engage meaningfully, one practical suggestion would just to ask open-ended questions as broadly as possible, as opposed to getting caught up on, particulars, especially if you don't want to put somebody on the spot if you can ask them a question they can't answer. That's never a place you want to be, maybe even in a very intimate family setting. But there are certain types of questions, and there are questions that are formulated in a certain way where you could put anybody on the spot. And as long as they're feeling comfortable in that setting, it's a way to really pull them in and allow them to contribute meaningfully. My favorite Pesach thought, and actually it's really, it dominates, my thinking and my teaching and preaching throughout the entire year, though I don't necessarily use the same expression, is the whole idea of maschil begnosim masayim b'shavach. That Chazal tell us that the proper format for the Pesach Seder is to start off by acknowledging not just the avdus in the most literal sense, but the challenges that we have experienced in our past. I know that Sharon is a big fan of Brene Brown, if I remember correctly, and loves the pointing out how important it is that we feel comfortable with our vulnerability, and that it's important to be vulnerable. And going back to what I said before, in order to make the Pesach experience meaningful, we want to try to tap into that. The way we make ourselves vulnerable is just talking about our own vulnerabilities, our own challenges, acknowledging, here's what I struggle with, here's where I sometimes feel trapped, namely like an Eved. And here is something that I would like to strive, and here is something that I've experienced, which has enabled me to sense a little bit of freedom of chayrus in my life. And this idea, obviously will carry us through the entire Seder, but it is one that's really an opportunity to give people an experience that will really inspire them beyond the Seder. I mean, it's clear, and this is my final thought, it's clear that the Pesach Seder was supposed to be something that would catalyze growth throughout the entire year. It's not about the moment. It's really, I know this sounds, very NCSY-ish, but, it's what happens after the Kumsitz or the great regional convention. Sorry, we'll talk offline afterwards if you'd like. But clearly, I mean, the Torah is not shticky. This is not a gimmick. This is idea of giving people an opportunity to see, I can be great. I can be great. I can achieve chayrus in every sense of the word. And again, coming back to where I started, this year we have an awesome opportunity. Let's take advantage of it and make the best of an otherwise very difficult and challenging situation.
Amen. Karen, do you mind sharing your one most favorite Seder idea that you share at your Seder? So there's no cheating. It can't be that great cheer you heard on, YU Torah.
Right. So we always talk, actually very similar to what Rabbi Rothbach says. I always share the idea of the Seder as a transformative experience. Rav Soloveitchik writes about, it's published many times, that idea in from his writings and in his name, that a person should leave the Seder different than how they come into the Seder. and that the entire experience leading up to the Seder, from Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the preparation, all of the work, that's all meant to build to a moment where we can see ourselves as the best version of ourselves, and not necessarily because everything at the Seder always goes so perfectly, but it's our personal inner transformation that takes place as we follow in the footsteps every year, generation after generation, to see where we have been, where we can go, again, on a national level as Am Yisrael, and also on a personal level. I find that idea very powerful and very, very inspiring.
Beautiful. And I just shared a link into the chat. I don't know if all the participants are following. Been sharing a couple links. And I just shared a link to a New York Times article I shared every year in my at my Pesach Seder. It's the introduction to my book, which I'm not going to plug because I have some measure of self-discipline, very small measure, but it's there. And it's about how different family narratives can build resilience, and it's worth looking at. Sharon, do you have an idea that you love to share every year at your Pesach Seder?
With your permission, I'd like to share a piece that I love to share with parents every year, but you'll understand in a moment why I don't share it with the kids. And it's amazing how an artist can help us understand and appreciate something from a whole new perspective. If any of you are familiar with David Moss and the David Moss Haggadah, he is an artist that lives in Israel. And my mother-in-law had bought this for me maybe 25 years ago. And he has one page that is so powerful to me as a parent, and I think for all parents. If you could see this, he takes the Baruch HaMakom Baruch Hu, Baruch Shanatan Torah L'Am Yisrael Baruch Hu, and he places a Baruch right on top of each of the Daled Banim. And to me, this is a message that the Daled Banim is really not for our kids. It's really a message for us parents. It's a directive for us to look for the Baruch, to look for the bracha, to look for the blessing in each and every one of our children, to embrace the challenges, to embrace diversity, and to realize that in order to help create a Seder that's transformative and personal and experiential for everybody, it all starts with our being true to ourselves in really viewing each of our kids as a blessing.
Beautiful idea. And, I'll share one, not an idea, but an idea about ideas, and that is that at my Pesach Seder every single year, my mother and my father share the same exact Torah every single year at every Seder. It's almost become a running joke, and I remember I was talking to a close friend of mine, Reb Simcha Willig, and he said his father, Reb Mordechai Willig, does the same exact thing. Doesn't come up with every year a new flashy idea and a new vart. He comes back to the Torahs and ideas that animate the night. And I think for a lot of people, instead of going out and finding 50 ideas and giving them out, find that one idea that you can really stick with you, that animates you and inspires you. Rabbi Benovitz, do you want to share a concluding one Pesach idea that you share at your Seder?
Sure. And if it's going to be the concluding remarks, I would really want to preface it, first of all, by thanking all the people who joined us and the co-panelists here. It's been so inspiring for me, both to have this kind of audience and to have this kind of guidance and direction. I've been taking good notes and really have learned a lot from the remarks that we've all been privileged to listen to from everyone else, and really by your excellent moderation, Rav David. It's really been helpful in getting this conversation along, and it's much, much appreciated. I'll cheat just a little bit because there isn't an idea that we share all the time in words, but hopefully the actions of our Seder experience speak louder than words in communicating one particular idea and message that is, I think, more needed now than ever before. Rabbi Rothwachs alluded before to the fact that one of the things when we say that we want to encourage questions from the children, really can be paraphrased to say that we want to encourage imagination, not just from the children, but from all participants. Can we have a Seder experience that allows us all to imagine, that allows us all to dream a little bit? My most favorite and pertinent Pesach Seder idea would be simply the halacha of chayev adam liros or laharos es atzmo ki'ilu hu yatsa mitzrayim. You have to be able to close your eyes and imagine yourself having a very different type of experience and connecting in a different way. A very wise man, probably many wise men and wise women, have said throughout history that one of the most critical ingredients for a practicing Jew and for a successful Jew is to be able to have the ability to imagine, to be able to have that sense of imagination. We draw on that power when we pray. Certainly for thousands of years, we've drawn upon that power when we've yearned for Yerushalayim, Hayinu Kecholmim, and we've wondered what our Seder would be like at the Har HaBayis, and we've wondered what our Seder would be like with the Carbon Pesach and the Beis HaMikdash and living in our land. And so much of that, obviously, we have been able to realize to an extent, and that gives validity and strength to the capacity that we have to imagine and to dream a little bit. And certainly in the answer to some of the earlier questions, this Seder more than ever before, we are going to have to employ our power to imagine the people that are not with us, that we wish were, imagine them being there at the Seder and to bring their voices down into the Seder, to imagine our conducting the Seder in a very different context, in a very different way, with the joy that that entails, and to imagine what we can be and what the chinuch to our children can be, and the types of conversations that we wish we could have and that we want to have more often, to imagine them and then to live out that imagination in the best way possible. And when they compose the Haggadah around this premise of chayev adam liros es atzmo, that a person must be able to close his or her eyes and imagine and to dream and to think about not what's in front of us and not the reality of today, but the reality of tomorrow, that we're hoping for and we're praying for. I can't think of a more powerful message for the Seder night, and certainly for this Seder night more than any others. We need to use our power of tefillah, of yearning, of dreaming, and of imagination more than ever before.
A beautiful closing thought. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. Thank you to the participants. Thank you to Camp Morashah and NCSY for really making this happen. So many beautiful ideas about connecting before the Seder through Zoom. I love the idea shared, I believe it was from Sharon, about reading letters at the Seder. Sharon, Karen, I forgot who had shared that, about reading letters during the Seder with ideas to connect to those who will be absent from the Seder. And really throughout this conversation about connecting to all of the people around our table and those who could not be at our table. This year will undoubtedly be different. And I'm so appreciative to everyone for participating in this Seder, and hopefully together we'll be able to transcend and persevere. And next year it will not only be Yerushalayim, but Amir Hashem will be together. Thank you all so much.